I am Stephanie, 29 years old, and until last month I thought investing $40,000 in my dad Richard's apartment was the smartest financial decision I ever made. 3 years of paying rent on top of that investment all gone in one devastating moment at my brother Nathan's engagement party. Dad had always favored Nathan, but I never imagined he would steal my future and hand it to my brother while telling me to get out of my own home. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could. Before I dive into how my own family stabbed me in the back, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like button if you have ever been taken advantage of by someone you trusted. Growing up in the Johnson household meant one thing for me, always coming in second place to my golden boy brother Nathan. From our earliest childhood memories, the pattern was clear. Nathan was 5 years older than me, and in my father's eyes he could do no wrong. When Nathan won third place in a spelling bee, Dad took the whole family out for a celebration dinner. When I won first place in the state mathematics competition, I got a quick good job and nothing more. Our home in Springfield was modest but comfortable. Dad worked as a real estate developer, not hugely successful but well-respected in our community. Mom was a high school English teacher, the one person who seemed to see me clearly. She would whisper encouragements when Dad was too busy praising. "Nathan, your time will come, Stephanie. Keep shining your light." But my time never seemed to arrive. When I brought home straight, as Dad would nod and then immediately ask if I had seen how well Nathan did on the football field. When I saved all my babysitting money to buy my first laptop for school, Dad was busy co-signing for Nathan's new car, even though he had already crashed his previous one. Then tragedy struck when I was 14. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer, and within 8 months she was gone. Her absence left a void in our family that was never filled. For me, it meant losing my only advocate, the only person who balanced out the disproportionate attention Nathan received. After Mom died, Dad became even more focused on Nathan. It was as if he poured all his parental energy into one child, leaving nothing for the other. I tried everything to win his approval. I joined every academic club, graduated as valedictorian, earned a scholarship to a prestigious university, and eventually became a certified public accountant with a respected firm. None of it seemed to matter. Meanwhile, Nathan coasted through life on charm and Dad's endless support. He dropped out of 3 different colleges, started and failed at various business ventures, and somehow always landed on his feet because Dad was there with his checkbook open. By the time I was 26 and Nathan was 31, the pattern was firmly established. Nathan messes up, Dad bails him out, Stephanie achieves, and no one notices. Despite all this, I craved connection with my remaining family. Dad was difficult and clearly favored my brother, but he was still my father. Nathan was self-centered, but still my brother. I kept thinking that if I just worked hard enough, saved enough money, or achieved enough success, Dad would finally see me as worthy of the same love and support he showered on Nathan. My career as an accountant was going well. I had a good position at a mid-sized firm, handled important clients, and was on track for a promotion. The only problem was housing. The city had become increasingly expensive, and renting was eating up too much of my income. I wanted to buy a place of my own, but saving for a down payment while paying high rent seemed impossible. That was when Dad came to me with a proposition that in retrospect was the beginning of my downfall. He owned several rental properties around the city, including a 2-bedroom apartment in a nice area that had recently become vacant. "Stephanie," he said during one of our rare father-daughter dinners, "I've been thinking about your housing situation. That apartment on Maple Street, the one I just renovated, it could be a good investment for you." My heart leaped. Was Dad finally seeing me? Finally offering the same kind of help he had always given Nathan? "The way I see it," he continued, "you could put in $40,000 as an investment in the property. Consider it a down payment of sorts. Then you pay the regular rent, and in a few years, once you have proven you can maintain the payments, I will transfer the deed to your name." It sounded perfect. The apartment was worth at least $300,000 in the current market. A $40,000 investment plus regular rent payments was more than fair. And Dad was finally offering me something substantial, recognizing my financial responsibility in a way he never had before. "This could be your chance to build some real equity," Dad said, sounding more like a father than he had in years. "I know you are good with money, unlike your brother." That small acknowledgement meant everything to me. Finally, a recognition that my responsibility and hard work had value. I agreed immediately, withdrew $40,000 from my savings account, and handed it over to Dad. We signed a simple agreement stating that I was investing in the property with the intent of future ownership. Looking back, I should have had a lawyer review it, but this was my father. I trusted him completely. For the next 3 years, I poured my heart and money into that apartment. Beyond the $40,000 investment, I paid $1,800 in rent every month. Never late, not even once. I updated the kitchen with new countertops, replaced the outdated bathroom fixtures, and even installed new hardwood flooring in the living room, all at my own expense. The place was transformed into a beautiful home that I was proud of. I thought I was building my future one payment and renovation at a time. Little did I know that Dad had other plans for the home I had invested, so much in plans that revolved around Nathan, as everything in our family eventually did. The news of Nathan's engagement came during our monthly family dinner, a tradition I maintained despite the clear favoritism that persisted at these gatherings. Nathan arrived 30 minutes late as usual, but with an unusual bounce in his step and a woman I had only met twice before, Brianna Thompson. "Dad, Steph, I have big news," Nathan announced, before even sitting down. He grabbed Brianna's hand, both of them beaming. "We are engaged." Dad immediately jumped from his chair, engulfing Nathan in a bear hug. I could not remember ever receiving myself. My boy getting married. This is the happiest day of my life. Brianna stood somewhat awkwardly to the side, her 3-carat diamond ring catching the light. She came from money, the daughter of a successful surgeon and a corporate attorney. Beautiful, educated at an Ivy League school, and from what I could tell in our limited interactions, genuinely kind. She seemed almost too good for my perpetually unemployed brother, but love works in mysterious ways. I pushed aside my initial twinge of jealousy and embraced them both. "Congratulations, I am so happy for you two." And I meant it. Despite everything, I wanted my brother to be happy. "We have to celebrate properly," Dad declared, already pulling out his phone. "I will make reservations at the Capitol Grill. Only the best for my son and future daughter-in-law." Over the extravagant dinner that followed, plans for an elaborate engagement party quickly took shape. Dad insisted on hosting it at his country club, sparing no expense. Brianna's parents would be flying in from Connecticut, and the guest list quickly grew to over 100 people. "Stephanie," Dad said, finally acknowledging my presence, "you are good at organizing. Can you help with the details? Make sure everything goes smoothly." It was not a request so much as an expectation, but I agreed. Perhaps helping make this perfect would finally earn me some recognition. In the weeks that followed, I spent countless hours coordinating with vendors, designing invitations, and creating a seating chart while still maintaining my demanding job. Brianna and I actually grew closer during this time. Unlike my brother and father, she seemed to genuinely appreciate my efforts and attention to detail. "I never had a sister," she confided during one of our planning sessions. "It is nice to have someone to share this with." Her words warmed my heart. Maybe this new addition to our family would somehow help balance the dynamics. Maybe Brianna would see me in ways my father and brother never had. During this time, I also had several conversations with Dad about my apartment. The 3-year mark of our agreement was approaching, and I wanted to ensure the deed transfer was on his radar. About the apartment, I brought up carefully during one planning meeting. "We are coming up on 3 years since our agreement. I have all the payment records and receipts for the renovations I have done." Dad nodded vaguely. "Let us get through this engagement party first. We can discuss the apartment business afterward." Something in his tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. I needed to believe that my father would honor our agreement. My best friend Rachel was less optimistic when I shared this with her over coffee. "I do not trust your dad on this," she said bluntly. "You should get everything in writing, properly notarized, before this engagement party happens." "He is my father," I defended, though a small voice inside me whispered that Rachel might be right. He would not cheat me. Rachel gave me a look that spoke volumes. "The same father who has bailed Nathan out of every mess but never helped you with a dime for college. That father." Her words stung because they contained truth I was not ready to face. Still, I pushed forward with the engagement party preparations, telling myself that everything would work out. A week before the party, I overheard a conversation between Dad and Nathan that should have been my final warning. I had stopped by Dad's house to drop off the finalized guest list and heard them talking in the study. The thing is, Dad, Nathan was saying, once we are married, we will need a place to live. Brianna's apartment is too small, and you know my current place is a disaster. Do not worry about it, son, Dad replied in the warm, conspiratorial tone he reserved only for Nathan. I have something in mind. Consider it an engagement gift. My stomach dropped, but I convinced myself they must be talking about one of Dad's other properties. Surely not my apartment, not after everything I had invested, not after our agreement. I cleared my throat and entered the room, ending their conversation abruptly. As the engagement party approached, I found myself both excited for the celebration and increasingly anxious about my future. The apartment had become my home, my sanctuary, and the physical representation of my father's rare acknowledgement of my worth. The thought of losing it was almost too painful to consider. The country club ballroom was transformed into an elegant celebration space, with white roses and orchids adorning every table, champagne flowing freely, and a string quartet playing softly in the corner. As the person who had coordinated most of the details, I arrived 3 hours early to ensure everything was perfect. The caterers, the florist, the musicians all followed the meticulous plans I had created. Guests began arriving at 7 o'clock, filling the room with congratulatory energy. Brianna's parents, the distinguished Dr. and Mrs. Thompson, made a grand entrance, looking every bit the wealthy East Coast couple they were. Dad greeted them with unusual deference, clearly impressed by their status and eager to match their generosity toward the engaged couple. I wore a navy blue dress I had saved for months to buy, wanting to look my best despite being relegated to the background of this family milestone. Several relatives commented that they hardly recognized me grown up and successful, though none seemed particularly interested in hearing about my actual achievements. At 8:30, Nathan and Brianna made their entrance to enthusiastic applause. She looked radiant in a designer dress, her dark hair swept up elegantly, while Nathan sported a new suit that Dad had undoubtedly purchased for the occasion. They moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations, looking genuinely happy and in love. Dinner was served at elegantly appointed tables, followed by several heartfelt toasts. Brianna's father spoke eloquently about welcoming Nathan into their family. Her mother tearfully described how she had always wanted her daughter to find true love. Several of Nathan's friends recounted embarrassing but affectionate stories from their college days. Then Dad stood up, champagne glass in hand, commanding the attention of the entire room. My heart raced inexplicably. Something about his expression, a mixture of pride and secretive pleasure, sent warning signals through my body. Today is not just a celebration of an engagement, he began, his voice carrying across the now silent room. It is a celebration of family, of continuity, of setting up the next generation for success. He motioned for Nathan and Brianna to join him at the front of the room. They stood beside him, glowing with happiness and anticipation. A marriage needs a solid foundation, Dad continued. A place to call home, to build a life together. My throat went dry. Surely he was not about to do what I feared. Which is why Dad reached into his jacket pocket. My gift to you both is this. He pulled out a large envelope and handed it to Nathan with flourish. My brother opened it, revealing a property deed. My property deed. The apartment I had invested $40,000 in. The home I had renovated and cared for. The future I had been promised. The deed to the Maple Street apartment, Dad announced proudly. Fully paid off in both your names. Our gift to you to start your life together. The room erupted in applause while I sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. Nathan and Brianna looked surprised but delighted, examining the document with excitement. Then Dad turned to me, his expression hardening almost imperceptibly. Stephanie, you will need to move out by the end of the month. The newlyweds will need time to make the place their own before the wedding. The room continued to buzz with conversation, most guests unaware of the betrayal unfolding before them. A few who knew about my living situation glanced at me uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. No one challenged what was happening. I felt as though I had been punched in the stomach, all air leaving my lungs. 3 years of payments, $40,000 of my savings, countless weekends spent improving the property, all stolen from me in an instant, packaged as a gift to my brother and his bride-to-be. When I could finally move, I approached Dad during a quiet moment. That is my apartment. I said, my voice shaking with emotion. We had an agreement. I invested $40,000. I have been paying rent for 3 years. Dad barely looked at me, his attention still on the celebrating couple across the room. Do not be selfish, Stephanie. This is what families do. They help each other. You should be happy for your brother. But what about me? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Where am I supposed to go? You are good with money, he said dismissively. You will figure something out. Nathan and Brianna need this more than you do. With that, he walked away to rejoin the celebration, leaving me standing alone, invisible once again. Across the room, Nathan and Brianna were showing the deed to her parents, who looked suitably impressed by this generous gift. I wanted to scream, to flip tables, to make a scene that would force everyone to acknowledge what had just been done to me. Instead, I did what I had always done. I swallowed my pain, maintained my composure, and endured the rest of the evening in a state of numb disbelief. Guests continued to celebrate. The music played on champagne glasses, clinked in toasts to the happy couple, all while my world collapsed around me. Not a single person, not even Brianna, who I had thought was becoming a friend, seemed to notice or care about my devastation. As the party wound down, Nathan approached me, the deed still clutched in his hand like a trophy. Thanks, sis, he said with the casual entitlement that had defined our relationship. We are really excited about the apartment. Brianna already has some ideas for redecorating. I could not bring myself to respond. The apartment he was so excited about was one I had already redecorated, already made beautiful, already turned into a home. My home, now being handed to him, like everything else had been throughout our lives. The drive back to my apartment, the apartment that was no longer mine, was a blur of tears and disbelief. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my future, had been shattered in a single evening. The betrayal was complete, devastating, and apparently to everyone but me, entirely acceptable. I barely remember getting home that night. My body moved on autopilot, keys and the door shoes kicked off, collapsing onto the couch in the living room I had so carefully designed. The blue accent wall I had painted myself, the hardwood floors I had installed with help from a YouTube tutorial and a rented floor sander, the custom shelving a carpenter friend had helped me build, all of it, would soon belong to Nathan and Brianna. Tears came in unstoppable waves. I cried for the money lost, for the betrayal by my father, for the years of invisibility in my own family. But mostly I cried for the fool I had been believing, that this time would be different, that this time my father would see me as worthy of the same consideration he had always given my brother. When the tears finally subsided, I called Rachel. It was after midnight, but she answered immediately, as if she had been waiting for my call. He gave it away, I said, my voice hoarse from crying. The apartment. He gave it to Nathan and Brianna as an engagement present. What Rachel's shock was evident even through the phone. He cannot do that. You paid $40,000. You have been paying rent. He did it, in front of everyone. Handed them the deed and told me to move out by the end of the month. I am coming over, she said without hesitation. Do not do anything until I get there. 20 minutes later, Rachel arrived with a bottle of wine and a determined expression. She had been my best friend since college, the family I had chosen rather than been born into, and her loyalty had never wavered. We need to look at the agreement you signed, she said, all business despite the late hour, and find all your payment records. We spread everything out on my dining table, the table I had refinished myself on a rainy weekend last year. The agreement was frustratingly simple, stating only that I was investing $40,000 toward the eventual purchase of the property, contingent on maintaining regular rental payments. There was no specific timeline for the transfer of ownership, no protection against exactly what had just happened. Next, we gathered every piece of evidence of my investment, the bank transfer record for the initial $40,000, 3 years of rent payment receipts, invoices for all the improvements I had made to the property. Added together, I had put over $100,000 into an apartment that had just been gifted to my brother. This is theft, Rachel said flatly, looking at the stack of documents. Plain and simple. As the night wore on and the wine bottle emptied, my phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Thanks again for understanding about the apartment. We really appreciate it. Brianna says you can help us pick out new curtains if you want. The casual cruelty of his assumption that I was understanding about having my home stolen from me ignited something in my chest. The tears were gone, now replaced by a slow, burning anger I had never allowed myself to feel toward my family before. "No message from your dad, Rachel?" asked, watching my expression change as I read the text. "Nothing. He probably thinks this is completely normal. Take from Stephanie, give to Nathan, the way it has always been." Rachel reached for my hand across the table. "You know you do not have to accept this, right? You have rights." The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in my career and met with a friend who practiced real estate law. Dominic had been a year ahead of me in college, and we had kept in touch over occasional happy hours and professional networking events. "Based on what you have shown me," Dominic said after reviewing the documents, "you absolutely have legal standing. The agreement, while not as detailed as I would have drafted, clearly establishes your financial interest in the property. Your father cannot legally gift something you have partially paid for." "So what do?" I asked, hope flickering for the first time since the engagement party. "You have options," he explained. "We could file for an injunction to prevent the transfer of the deed. We could sue for your investment plus interest, or for specific performance of the implied contract. But before we go nuclear, let me draft a demand letter. Sometimes that is enough to make people realize you are serious." While Dominic worked on the letter, I returned to the apartment and truly looked at it through new eyes. Everything that made this place a home was mine, purchased with my money, selected with my taste, installed with my labor, or under my direction. Without those elements, it was just an empty shell. As this realization solidified, my phone buzzed again. A text from Brianna this time. "We are so excited about the apartment," Nathan says. "You have done some nice things with it. We will try to keep the best parts when we redecorate. Hope you are not too upset about moving. We found some cute studios across town that might work for you." The condescension was the final straw. Not only had they taken my home, but they were now positioning themselves as concerned helpers in finding me a cute studio to replace the two-bedroom apartment I had turned into a showcase. The apartment I had paid for. That evening, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the life I had built, and made a decision. I would not cry anymore. I would not beg my father for fairness he had never shown me. I would not accept the role of sacrificial lamb in the golden story of Nathan and Brianna. I would take back what was mine in the only way left to me. If I could not keep the apartment, I would at least keep everything I had put into it. Every last item. And I would do it methodically, strategically, and completely legally. This was no longer about trying to win my father's approval or my brother's consideration. This was about standing up for myself, perhaps for the first time in my life. The hurt was still there, a deep ache in my chest, but now it was fuel for action rather than paralysis. "If they want the apartment," I whispered to the empty room, "they can have it. But they will get exactly what Dad paid for, not what I built." The next morning began a new chapter in my life, one where I stopped being a victim and became the architect of my own response to injustice. I started by taking a complete inventory of everything in the apartment, creating a spreadsheet with items, purchase dates, costs, and documentation. The list was extensive, covering everything from the refrigerator I had purchased when the old one died, to the ceiling fans I had installed in every room, to the smart home system I had splurged on last Christmas. I took photographs of each room from multiple angles, documenting the current state of the apartment in its fully furnished, beautifully appointed condition. These would be my before pictures, evidence of what I had created and what I would be removing. My next step was to consult with another legal friend, Jessica, who specialized in property law. I needed to be absolutely certain of my rights before proceeding. "Fixtures are generally considered part of the real property," Jessica explained during our consultation. "But if you installed them yourself and can remove them without damaging the structure, you are within your rights to take them. For furniture and appliances, anything you purchased is clearly your personal property." Armed with this knowledge, I began to formulate my plan. I would need help both with the physical moving and with finding a new place to live on short notice. I reached out to my network of friends, people who knew the real me, not the invisible sister I had been in my family. Christopher, a colleague from a neighboring accounting firm, who I had always shared a warm rapport with, surprised me by offering both his truck and his weekend to help with the moving process. "I have never liked how your family treats you," he said, when I expressed my gratitude. "It is about time someone stood up for Stephanie." His support gave me strength I did not know I needed. For the first time, I saw myself through the eyes of people who actually valued me rather than through the dismissive gaze of my father and brother. I found a small but charming one-bedroom apartment in an up-and-coming neighborhood. The rent was manageable, and the landlord agreed to a flexible lease term when I explained my situation. It was nothing like my beautiful two-bedroom, but it would be mine, truly mine, without the shadow of my father's conditional generosity hanging over it. The weekend after the engagement party Operation Reclaim began, Christopher arrived early Saturday morning with his truck and two other friends, Jordan and Kevin, all ready to work. We started with the obvious items, my furniture, artwork, and personal belongings, but we did not stop there. I carefully removed the ceiling fans I had installed, replacing them with the basic light fixtures that had been there originally, which I had stored in the basement. I uninstalled the smart home system, including the thermostat's doorbell camera and security sensors. The stainless steel refrigerator, dishwasher, and microwave I had purchased all came out replaced with the dated appliances that had been there when I moved in, which I had also kept in storage. "Are you sure about this?" Christopher asked as we unscrewed the custom shelving units from the living room wall. "This is a lot of work just to make a point." "It is not just making a point," I replied carefully, filling the screw holes with putty. "It is reclaiming what is mine. They can have the apartment, but they do not get to have everything I put into it as well." We removed the bathroom vanity I had upgraded, the shower fixtures I had splurged on, and even the toilet I had replaced with a more efficient model. The kitchen lost its undercabinet, lighting the backsplash tiles I had meticulously installed over a 3-day weekend, and the butcher block island that had been the heart of my cooking space. Throughout this process, I received no contact from Dad or Nathan. They were busy with wedding planning, oblivious to the transformation occurring in the apartment they thought they were gifting in its improved state. By Sunday evening, the apartment had been returned to almost exactly the condition it had been in when I first moved in 3 years ago. The walls were still the colors. I had painted them as removing paint would have damaged the structure, but everything else that could be legally removed was gone. I took after photos of each room, the stark contrast to the before pictures highlighting just how much of myself I had put into the space. The final item to be moved was a custom bookcase that Christopher had helped me carry up 3 flights of stairs when I first bought it. As we maneuvered it down the same stairs, he paused on the landing. "You know what I just realized?" he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "In all of this, with everything your family did to you, I have not heard you say one vindictive thing. You are just taking what is rightfully yours." His observation struck me. It was true. Despite the hurt and betrayal, I was not acting out of revenge. I was simply reclaiming my dignity, my investment, my self-worth. "They took the apartment," I replied after a moment. "They do not get to take everything else too." That night, in my new smaller apartment surrounded by boxes and displaced furniture, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The grief was for the family I had always wanted, but never truly had for the father's approval. I had spent a lifetime chasing but never catching. The liberation was in finally seeing the truth and choosing to value myself even if they never would. I slept on my couch that first night, too exhausted to set up my bed. But despite the physical discomfort, I slept more peacefully than I had in years. For the first time, I was standing firmly in my own truth, and that solid ground provided a foundation no legal deed could ever grant or take away. 3 days after I moved out, my phone exploded with notifications. First came a series of increasingly frantic texts from Nathan. "What happened to all the stuff in the apartment? Where is the refrigerator and the microwave? Did you take everything? Answer your phone, Stephanie." I let the texts accumulate without responding. This was followed by voicemails, each one more indignant than the last. Finally, a call from Brianna, which I decided to answer. "Stephanie." Her voice was a mixture of confusion and accusation. "We just went to look at the apartment and—" "What happened?" "It is empty. There is nothing there except some old appliances." "I took my belongings with me when I moved out," I replied calmly, as instructed. "But the furniture, the nice kitchen, all the fixtures, those were my personal property. I purchased them with my own money." There was a long pause before Brianna spoke again, her voice suddenly uncertain. "Nathan said this was your dad's apartment that he was giving us." "My dad owned the structure," I explained, maintaining my composure. Everything inside it was mine. I invested $40,000 plus 3 years of rent payments into that apartment with a written agreement that it would eventually be transferred to my name. Instead, it was given to you and Nathan without my consent. Another silence, longer this time. I could almost hear her reassessing everything she had been told. I did not know, she finally said. Nathan never mentioned you had invested in it. I am not surprised, I replied. But now you know. After hanging up, I expected an angry call from Nathan, but instead my doorbell rang an hour later. Through the peephole, I could see my father, his face flushed with anger. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" he demanded, trying to push past me into the apartment. I stood my ground, blocking the entrance. "I am not inviting you in, Dad. You can say whatever you need to say from right there." His eyes widened at my unprecedented defiance. "You gutted the apartment. Nathan and Brianna went over there and found an empty shell." "I removed my personal property," I corrected him. "Everything I purchased with my own money came with me. The apartment structure that you own is intact just as it was when I moved in." "Those were fixtures. Part of the property." "Actually, no. I consulted with 2 lawyers. Since I installed them myself and removed them without damaging the structure, they remain my personal property. I have documentation for every purchase, installation, and removal." Dad's face cycled through various shades of red. "This is about family, Stephanie. About helping your brother start his married life." "No, Dad. This is about you taking $40,000 of my money, plus 3 years of rent, plus all the improvements I made, and giving them to Nathan without my consent. This is about you breaking our agreement." "We did not have a formal contract," he blustered, though, with less conviction. "We had a written agreement," I countered, "plus bank records, rent receipts, and witnesses to our arrangement. My lawyer says that constitutes an enforceable contract under state law." At the mention of a lawyer, Dad's expression shifted from anger to calculation. "You would sue your own father, your own brother." "I would protect myself from theft, regardless of who committed it." We stood in silence for a moment, the power dynamic between us shifting palpably. For the first time in my life, I was not backing down, not accepting the role of family sacrificial lamb. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice gruff. "I want the $40,000 I invested, plus interest. I want reimbursement for the increased value my improvements added to the property. Or, I want the apartment transferred to my name as originally agreed." "That is ridiculous. The apartment is worth much more than $40,000. "Yes, it is. That is why our agreement was that I would invest that amount plus pay rent for a specified period after which the property would be mine. You broke that agreement, Dad, not me." The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of Nathan, who came bounding up the stairs, his face twisted with indignation. "You took everything. The place is empty." "I took what was mine," I repeated, growing stronger with each assertion of this truth. "But the appliances, the fixtures, even the shower heads, all purchased by me, installed by me, and legally mine to remove." Nathan looked to Dad for support the way he always had. "Tell her she has to put it all back." "She has a lawyer," Dad muttered, the fight visibly draining from him as the reality of the situation sank in. "A lawyer? You are suing us. Your own family." Nathan's incredulity would have been comical if it were not so painful. The concept that actions might have consequences seemed entirely foreign to him. "I am protecting what is legally mine," I stated firmly. "Something I should have done long ago." From behind Nathan appeared Brianna, who had apparently been waiting in the car. Her expression was not angry but contemplative as she assessed the scene. "Nathan," she said quietly, "can I talk to you for a minute?" They stepped aside for a hushed conversation during which I could see Brianna's expression grow increasingly concerned while Nathan became more defensive. When they returned, it was Brianna who spoke. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," she said diplomatically. "Nathan was not clear about the situation with the apartment. If Stephanie invested money with the expectation of ownership, that changes things." For the first time, my brother looked uncertain, caught between his fiancée's evident discomfort with the situation and his lifelong expectation that everything would always work out in his favor. "Look," I said, seizing the moment, "I have all the documentation with me. We can go through it together so everyone understands exactly what happened. In my small living room, surrounded by the furniture and fixtures that had so recently occupied the disputed apartment, I laid out the evidence: the written agreement, bank transfer records, rent receipts, and before and after photos of the plain apartment showing the extent of my improvements. Brianna reviewed the documents carefully, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "Nathan, did you know about this agreement?" "Dad mentioned Stephanie was staying there temporarily," he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "He said it would be perfect for us after the wedding." Dad shifted uncomfortably under Brianna's scrutiny. "It was a family arrangement, nothing formal." $40,000 is quite formal, Brianna observed, her tone cooling noticeably. "As are 3 years of rent payments and all these improvements." She turned to me. "Stephanie, I genuinely did not know about your investment. If I had, I never would have accepted the apartment as a gift." Her acknowledgement of my position shifted the energy in the room. For perhaps the first time, someone was taking my side against my father and brother. "This is not right," she continued, addressing my father directly. "You cannot take Stephanie's investment and give it to us. That is not a gift, that is." She hesitated, then said it, "That is theft." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Dad's face flushed again, but he seemed unable to formulate a response to this unexpected alliance. Nathan, sensing the tide turning against him, attempted to salvage the situation. "We can figure something out. Maybe we can pay Stephanie back over time." "The apartment is worth at least $300,000, I pointed out. "My total investment, including the $40,000 rent and improvements, is over $100,000. That leaves plenty of equity for an actual gift if Dad wants to give you one. But he cannot give away what is not entirely his to give." The four of us sat in tense silence as the reality of the situation settled over everyone. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice lacking its usual authority. "I will talk to my lawyer tomorrow. We will figure something out." 2 days later, I received an email from Dad's attorney proposing a settlement reimbursement of my $40,000 investment plus $10,000 for improvements in exchange for relinquishing any claim to the Denzel apartment. It was less than I deserved, but more than I had expected from a man who had never prioritized fairness where I was concerned. After consulting with my own lawyer, I countered with a demand for the full $40,000 plus $25,000 for improvements and increased property value, along with a formal acknowledgement that the original agreement had been breached. To my surprise, they accepted within hours. The repayment came with no apology, no acknowledgement of the emotional damage done. But for the first time in my life, I had stood firm against the family pattern that had always devalued me, and I had won, at least in part. Word of the dispute spread through our extended family and social circle. Some relatives reached out to express support, saying they had always been uncomfortable with the blatant favoritism, but had never felt it was their place to intervene. Others took Dad's side, suggesting I was being selfish and ungenerous to my brother. Brianna, to her credit, maintained contact, occasionally meeting me for coffee, independent of Nathan. "The whole thing has made me see your family differently," she confided during one such meeting. "I love Nathan, but I am going into this marriage with my eyes open about certain patterns." As for Nathan and Dad, our relationship entered a new phase of cautious distance. The comfortable denial that had allowed them to benefit at my expense for years had been shattered, replaced by an awkward awareness that I would no longer accept being the family doormat. It was not the resolution I would have chosen if given a perfect world, but it was a resolution I could live with, one that allowed me to hold my head high and move forward with the knowledge that I had finally valued myself enough to fight for what was mine. 6 months passed, a period of profound transformation in my life. My new apartment, though smaller than the one I had lost, had become a true sanctuary. I arranged my furniture, hung my artwork, and installed my fixtures with a new sense of ownership and permanence. This space was unquestionably mine, not subject to the whims of family manipulation or conditional generosity. Christopher, who had been so supportive during the move, had become more than just a friend. What started as weekend coffee conversations evolved into dinner dates, movie nights, and eventually a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine care. Unlike my family, Christopher saw me, clearly valued my strength, and admired my principles. I was impressed by how you handled everything he told me one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on my small balcony. Most people would have either given in or gone scorched earth. You found a third way, standing your ground without destroying everything in the process. His perspective helped me see my actions in a new light. I had not been petty or vindictive as part of me had feared. I had been measured and principled, taking back what was mine while leaving intact what was not. My relationship with my father remained strained and limited. The financial settlement had been completed, but the emotional damage was not so easily repaired. We spoke occasionally, brief, superficial conversations that carefully avoided any mention of the apartment incident or the deeper patterns it had exposed. I made peace with this new reality. For years, I had chased a father's love and approval that always seemed just out of reach. Now I accepted that this approval might never come, and more importantly, I no longer needed it to feel whole. Nathan and Brianna's wedding took place as planned, though scaled back somewhat from their original vision. I declined to attend, sending a modest gift and a card wishing them happiness. Through mutual friends, I heard that they had spent considerable money refurnishing the apartment, discovering too late how much work and expense goes into creating a beautiful home. Brianna continued to reach out occasionally, maintaining a tentative connection independent of my brother. During one lunch, she confided that the apartment incident had fundamentally changed her view of her new family. Nathan still does not really understand what happened, she admitted. He thinks you overreacted to what he sees as a family gift gone wrong, but I see it differently now. I see how they have treated you all these years. Her insight was unexpected but validating. Someone else could finally see the pattern that had shaped my family dynamic for decades. Professionally, I channeled my energy into my career, earning a promotion and taking on more challenging clients. The confidence I had gained from standing up for myself translated into greater assertiveness in the workplace, and my superiors noticed the change. Whatever happened earlier this year, my manager commented during my performance review, it transformed you. You are more decisive, more willing to take calculated risks. It suits you. Beyond work and romance, I invested in new friendships, surrounding myself with people who valued authenticity and reciprocity. Rachel remained my rock, the friend who had seen me at my lowest, and helped me find the strength to rise. But new connections formed as well, each one affirming that healthy relationships need not come at the cost of my dignity or self-worth. The financial settlement from my father, combined with my savings and improved salary, allowed me to begin looking for a condo to purchase a home that would be unquestionably mine from the start. Christopher joined me on these viewing trips, offering his perspective, but always emphasizing that the final decision was mine alone, a refreshing change from the controlling dynamics I had grown up with. As I rebuilt my life, I also worked on healing the wounds of betrayal. This was perhaps the hardest part, learning to trust again after those closest to me had proven untrustworthy. Through reading therapy and honest conversations with friends, I came to understand that forgiveness did not require reconciliation or forgetting. I could forgive my father and brother for my own peace of mind without allowing them the opportunity to hurt me again. I could acknowledge our shared history without being bound by its unhealthy patterns. I could love them from a distance that protected my hard-won self-respect. On the one-year anniversary of the engagement party that had changed everything, I sat in my new condo, finally my own, surrounded by the furnishings that had followed me through this journey. Christopher had brought champagne to celebrate the closing, and as we toasted my new beginning, I felt a sense of completion. "To owning your space," he said, clinking his glass against mine, in every sense of the phrase. The journey had been painful, the betrayal cutting deep into beliefs about family and belonging that I had held since childhood. But from that wound had grown something unexpected, a stronger sense of self, clearer boundaries, and the courage to expect better treatment than I had previously accepted. If my brother's engagement had revealed the worst in my family dynamic, it had also revealed the best in me, a resilience and dignity I had not known I possessed. The apartment I had lost had been just a space, but what I had gained was infinitely more valuable, a sense of self-worth that no deed or document could ever grant or take away. Life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. My father, in a surprising turn, recently reached out to suggest meeting for coffee, perhaps the first step toward a more honest relationship. Nathan and Brianna are expecting their first child, a development that brings complicated emotions, but also the opportunity for a new generation to break old patterns. As for me, I am building a life based on my own values rather than the approval I once desperately sought. It is not the life I had planned or expected, but it is authentic and hard-won, built on lessons learned through pain but leading to genuine peace. The betrayal that once seemed like an ending turned out to be a beginning, the first page of a new chapter, written in my own hand, guided by my own heart. And for that unexpected gift, I am at last truly grateful. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family members who took you for granted? I would love to hear how you handled it in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people we love most. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Remember, valuing yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage on yours.